morning, Cruzy. Good morning, buddy. It's definitely one of those mornings that I want the warmest socks ever. Good morning, buddy. Good morning, everybody. We're still in the mountains in Squamish, BC, and what a surreal moment this morning. The sun is just coming up over there on these snow-covered mountains. It is a complete winter wonderland around here, and I couldn't ask for a better start to a day. Oh, man. Oh, come on. I totally thought I'd be able to just scrape this off and it'd be nice, clean glass. What was I thinking? It's frozen and I don't have an ice scraper. Can you believe that? I don't have one. The reason why I don't is because my front windows, I usually just crank my heat on until it defrosts and then I take off. Come on. All I want right now is some solar production. And I really don't want to get up on this roof because it's covered in snow and probably just a little bit dangerous. Come on, man. I just want some solar. If I get all the snow off. Oh, I lost my piece of wood. We'll get a little piece of one panel anyway. Well, I got some solar production anyway. Getting solar in the winter is a little bit of work. This would be a bit easier if I had like a lower roof where I could get up on top of it, but right now, me getting up on my ladder and climbing up on that snowy, slippery roof, not an option. Oh, just as I turn my camera on. As the sun starts to come out, the snow's starting to fall off the trees a little bit. But today I wanted to talk to you guys about surviving winter van life. I'm no expert at this subject. Even though I've been in my van for multiple years now, I'm still no expert. Everything in van life is an experiment. You kind of learn things as you go along the way. But I have learned a few things over these last few years that I want to share with you. Van life is not cold. You don't freeze in the van. No matter if you're running a little buddy heater or if you have the Olympian Wave 3, the one I had the last few years, or you've got the one you hear howling behind me. You hear that? Yeah, that's my dry air heater, just keeping her good and toasty warm in there. But no matter what heater you choose, you're not gonna be cold in the van. And I know a lot of people that are just starting van life or outsiders to van life, they're always like, are you okay out there? Winter's coming, I'm really concerned about you. They don't have to be concerned because we are toasty inside of this thing. So the buddy heater, it works. It will keep you warm. That thing blasts a monster amount of heat off of it. But the problem with it, blasting so much heat off of it, it becomes dangerous because it super heats up everything that's in front of it. So you do need a fair amount of space around those heaters, and be very mindful of how much fresh air you have coming in, because those heaters do consume a lot of the oxygen inside of your vehicle. And that's the downside to using propane, is that the oxygen consumption in there should be for you, not for the heater. But the heater, because it's combusting inside of your vehicle, it takes oxygen to combust to create heat. So that's something to be mindful if you're gonna start your van life off with a buddy heater. So the one that I stepped up to from there, and the only heaters I can talk about are the ones that I personally have experience with, was the Olympian Wave 3. So the Wave 3, the Wave 6, the Wave 8, all kind of the same line, just different sizes of heaters. The Wave 3 was great. It still combusted inside, but because it was a lower BTU heater, it took a lot longer to heat up, but it did consume less propane and less oxygen, and the heat definitely felt a lot drier. So for me, if I was gonna suggest somebody, if they're like, I have to do propane, which one should I choose? That's gonna be all on you to make that end of day decision. But I personally enjoyed my Wave Series heater versus my Buddy Series heater. And I kind of felt a little safer with my Wave Series. So now running into this year, I'm just starting off with the new, I don't know what they're called, parking heaters, like the dry forced air heater. There's tons of different brands that manufacture them. There's some knockoff ones you can buy on Amazon, but they're all kind of in the same ballpark. They combust outside of your vehicle, which is exactly what you want. You don't want your heater to combust inside because it's dangerous. Now, all the air that's inside my van is for me and the dog, which is super awesome. But if you're concerned about being cold in the van throughout winters, you're probably not going to. Honestly, get yourself, if you're really worried, get yourself a good Sub-Zero sleeping bag if you want to be, bundled in. I tried that when I very first started because I watched all these YouTube videos and everybody's like, well, you get this, to get this, to get this, and to get that. So I got all those things, and I realized right quick that my Sub-Zero sleeping bag really wasn't something that I enjoyed sleeping in. I didn't like the feeling of it. So I never used it. Plus, I really never needed it. It wasn't something that was like that cold that was necessary. I used 2 blankets that I brought from my apartment, and they were great. They kept me super warm. That and the heater. I never ran my heater overnight when I first got into the van because I never felt safe with the Buddy heater. But when I got my Wave 3, I also didn't run it all night long until I picked up this little puppy of mine because he didn't like to sleep in my bed when he was a puppy. He always slept on the floor, so I kept the heater on so he would stay warm. And then I had my roof vent at the time, so I just made sure I kept that open, kept the fan on to circulate some air, so at least we get to wake up in the morning. But yeah, so I wouldn't worry or stress about that kind of stuff, and always get into van life with what you can afford. You don't have to buy the big name brand $1,500 dry heater. You know what I mean? You don't have to buy what everybody else says you need to buy. Buy what you feel comfortable with putting in your van, because that's the best way to start, is what you can afford and what you feel right about using at the beginning. Just be mindful of whatever you're using, because even mine or the Buddy heater or whatever, choose ones. There's like Dickinson wood stoves and other things. Just be mindful of the precautions you need to take with every single heater that you do use, because some people are using the dry heaters like mine and using an external tank in your van. Just be super careful with stuff like that and just make sure that be safe. Simple as that. Other things about van life that I have noticed, I don't know if it's because people feel a little bit more bad that we're sleeping in our vehicles in the wintertime, but I do find that maybe this is just a me thing. Maybe it's just my mind thinking this way. But I think people kind of leave your van alone, even if you're in a van that's super noticeable, like a classic camper van with like hippie flowers painted on it, super colorful curtains. I think people have a tendency of going, poor guys, let's just leave them alone, let them sleep for the night. They must be cold in there. So I think you kind of get away with a little bit more in the winter than you would in the summertime. I don't know, maybe that's just me thinking this way, but yeah. So one thing I have noticed though on my travels, because I was in towns and cities last winter that get snow all season. So because I'm from Vancouver, we don't really have a snowplow crew out here. I'm outside of Vancouver right now. If it's snowing up here, it's raining down there. But because we don't have like a big snow removal crew, we don't have signs on the side of the road that say no parking, snowplow route, or no parking Wednesday, Friday, whatever, snowplow route. I noticed that on my travels when I was in Ontario last winter, and as I traveled through the provinces in Canada that were always covered in snow in the winter, that your street side parking in some cities actually completely vanish. And I'm an apartment guy. I'm one that's like, I'm sleeping in front of apartment buildings and townhouses. That's my thing. That's when I'm in the city, that's where I go. Apartments, townhouses, things like that where the streets are busy. But winter came and I'm like, oh, there's an apartment building that turned down the street, not a car. I'm like, why is there no cars out here? And then the big sign, snowplow route. So I started to wind through all these little apartment areas, no street parking because it's snowplow route. I was like, oh damn. And then I had to just go be creative and just find somewhere else to park for the night. But you will be limited on street side parking in winter times during winter season towns and cities. So kind of keep that in mind when you're traveling somewhere, especially if you're traveling somewhere brand new. Like that was a new experience for me. Being out here, we just park street side all winter long because in Vancouver we don't get winter. We go visit it just like we are now up here in the mountains visiting winter. But that's something that that definitely does happen. Also keep in mind on the places that you do park, even if it's not a snowplow route, watch those snow plows because they will bury you in. I had one situation like that last year where the plow came up, kind of mushed me up along the side. I got out of it. I ended up just backing up a few times and just pushing my way through it. But if I was in a smaller van, like a minivan or something like that, that might have been a pretty nasty situation. So one thing I think every van should carry is a small shovel. Mine's up in the rooftop carrier. Mine doesn't fold down or anything. It's just an actual like shorty little shovel. It's probably only like 2.5 feet long or something like that, maybe 3 feet. But keeping a shovel on hand comes in handy. So if you get stuck, you can get yourself out, or you can be a kind neighbor and help out somebody who's kind of stuck in a parking lot somewhere. It's always good to keep those things on hand. I don't carry this stuff, but I hear keeping kitty litter and stuff like that in your vehicle is a great idea. Winter chains. That is something I added this year. I never had winter chains before. Adding winter chains to your vehicle, especially here now because we're way up on the mountain, I'm going to feel good about leaving here because now I get to chain up and drive ourselves down the mountain good and safe, where before, well, you're at the mercy of whatever these mountain hills decide to throw at you without that extra bit of chain traction. And there's only been a couple times in my van life so far where I've been in a situation where I'm like, man, if I had chains I wouldn't be stuck right now. So I remember first year of my van life, me and my daughter were up at Mount Seymour, and they got literally like, let me pick them up, they got about that much snow on the ground. It was like literally nothing. My van got stuck. I was embarrassed. Like people had to help me push my van out. My daughter was like laughing at me. Thanks, Danica. Just thanks a lot. But just kind of making sure that you're prepped for anything that the world can throw at you. So like I said at the beginning, I'm not an expert. My solar panels. I don't have an ice scraper. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Lesson learned. So as soon as I get back to town, I'm gonna buy myself an ice scraper. So that way I can scrape off the solar panels and stuff like that. And the extra long brush would have been nice. Today I just used a piece of cut firewood just to brush off the roof and scrape it off. So in a day like today, like if I left it alone for probably about another couple of hours, that sunlight will probably melt all that stuff. But in the morning when the sun was out, I just wanted every ounce of solar production that I can get, because here in Canada is a lot different than once you start going south, like down into the US, because our sun stays on literally that much of an angle all day. It rises over here, stays over there, and falls down over there. it's never above my solar panel, and right here is where I need it. So if the sun came up, even if it's at a slight angle, it was always on my solar, no problem. But the sun literally comes up like this, so it always just barely skims the solar panel, making our solar production in the winter kind of like really crappy. But those are situations too, you know, in the wintertime, just be prepared. Make sure you keep that thing clean. That way you can get as much solar as you can. Because for me, I know I only got about 2 days worth of power in the van with power editing. Like if I'm editing like 3, 4, 5 hours a day, which is quite common, I know that's gonna drain a ton of the power out of my battery banks. So in the wintertime, to maximize as much solar production is key. Or for me, because I do alternator driving, is just to drive a little bit and or let the van run for a half hour here and there, just to kind of make sure there's some energy coming back in. So I don't know if there's anything major that needs to be talked about when it comes to winter. I think the big thing when people think about it is heating and are you going to be cold. And one last thing I need to talk about is insulation. So I insulated my van with a very small amount of insulation, and this is a really touchy subject. Everybody's got their own opinions when it comes to this stuff. Some people say you gotta spray foam that thing with like 10 feet of spray foam. A couple inches, I'm just exaggerating. But some people believe in spray foam. I myself, I don't think spray foam's a good idea, because I've seen brand new vans get all bubbled and warped on the outside because it expanded, pushed out the body, and wrecked a brand new van. And to me, spray foam is permanent. Like if you ever had a problem with your vehicle and you needed to get in to do some body work on there, your body guy can't weld if there's spray foam in there, because the spray foam will light on fire. So you got to think about those kind of things. If you were to ever damage your vehicle 5 years down the line, now you got to go in, take your entire wall panels apart, cut out all that area so they can work on it. So I personally think spray foam is a bad idea. Somebody once told me though, and this is so true, the best insulation to use in your van is insulation installed. Meaning that whatever you want to use, whatever you can afford, whatever you feel comfortable with, is the best insulation to use. Everybody's got their opinions across the board on everything, and you're entitled to what you want to say. But I myself used that pink XPS, I think it's called XPS insulation. It's the rigid pink foam boards. That's what I have as my primary insulation in my van, and I only have a ½ inch of it. That's it. I used a different type of insulation on my ceiling of the van, and that was just a white styrofoam. It has a green plastic on the top, a foil on the bottom, and it's just like regular styrofoam, like the good old classic styrofoam. And the reason why that is what went up on my ceiling is because it was $13 for a 4x8 foot sheet. I was broke when I started my van life. It's all I could afford. Winter was there and I was cold. I insulated my van in November at the parking lot of Home Depot. So I did things as I needed them and when I could afford them. And my whole van life has always been like that. I didn't rush to completely do everything at the beginning, and I'm glad that I didn't. Because living in my van when it was completely empty with no insulation, I got to see what happened on my walls. In like late summer weather, I got to see what happened on super rainy days with me inside. I got to see what happened with the bare metal with my buddy heater running with no insulation. So I have a bit more trust with what's happening in my van because I experienced my van when it was naked. So once I put the insulation in, I only put a small amount in because I only had a small amount of money. After the insulation went into my van, I started to kind of get a feel for what it was like with just a small amount. I didn't put walls up yet. There was just a bare bones insulation. And then as a bit more money came in, I put a little bit more up on the walls. So what I did was very simple. Let me show you just real quick here. This little section right here, on the inside, this is where a window would be. So on the inside of that is this exact metal that's on the outside. I cut 1/2 inch layer, I stuck it right over where the window would have been. Then I stuck another 1/2 inch layer all around the outside just to cage it all in. And that's it. So if I were to rip everything out of my van, you would see about 30% metal, like all the braces, like the little pieces that come out of the wall, the bridging, the support beams, those are all exposed. The only thing that's covered on my walls is any metal that was the exact metal on the outside, if that makes any sense. And then on the top is 2 1/2 inch layers of white foam. If I confused you guys, I'm sorry, but put it this way. I barely did any insulation in my van, and it has 100% worked. And if you watched a video of mine recently, his name is Randy. He lives in Saskatoon and like -30 winters. He has no insulation in his van, and nor has he ever. And he's had that van for a very, very long time, living in pretty harsh winters. What I think is necessary for when it comes to insulation is covering your walls. Put a small amount of insulation in there, cover up your walls, and be done with it. Because once your breath inside can't touch the metal, there's gonna be pretty much no condensation. This is just my opinions here. But my suggestion, if you do cover the walls, leave room for it to breathe. Like if there's sections in where the wall panels go up that you can still see through, perfect. Because if you can allow airflow to get behind your walls, then that airflow behind your walls will dry out any moisture if the moisture ever does get in there. But don't listen to me. Listen to that feeling in your stomach. Insulate your van how you want to insulate your van, with as much insulation as you feel comfortable with. Don't get twisted by what one person says. I say these in my videos because I try to speak my dead truth to what I feel and my personal experience. One more thing to keep in mind. When it comes to heating or insulation, keep in mind on who you take your advice from and the areas that they live in. So because I'm in Vancouver, we get a very wet, gross, moist winter. So our cold winter day chills to the bone because it's soaking wet. Here comes more stuff off the trees. But if you were to go a little bit farther into BC a little bit, like drive 8 more hours into the mountains, say into the Kootenays, we're talking super dry, fluffy winters all winter. They don't get the moisture issues. Like there's snow, like we get snowfall and we can make a snowball. Get slippery little bugger. But out there you can't. And that is a great way to judge if you have a dry climate or a wet climate. If your snow falls and you can make a snowball that easy, then you're living in a very wet climate. Basically meaning that you're gonna have a different experience with heat and insulation than somebody in a drier place. So please keep that in mind. So Randy, the guy I was telling you about with no insulation, he's in a place that gets an extremely dry winter for a majority of the winters. That might not fly here in Vancouver. So trust that feeling in your stomach with your heating and your insulation and everything that you do. And don't stress about things, guys. Van life is not as hard as you think it is. The first thing you need to do, guys, is just get your van. The rest of that stuff will slowly fall into place. All right, you guys? And if you want professional opinions on things, call an outfitting company, book an appointment, see if they can maybe do something with you guys on a phone call. Most of those guys will charge for something, but they will give you their experiences because they're more of an expert than somebody like me. So I'm just sharing my opinions with you guys. Hopefully this kind of helps ease your worries for starting van life in the winter. And woohoo! Did I just throw a snowball at me? All right, you guys, have yourself an awesome day, and I'm gonna go outside and play with the snow. Woohoo! Yeehaw! Where is he? Hey, buddy. You wanna come outside and play in the snow?